and welcome to a very special interview show of The Prode. In this special segment, we delve into the Ukraine conflict, a matter of great global concern. The ongoing crisis has ignited intense international interest, primarily in response to Russia's action, which has raised questions about their conformity with the international law. Today, we are delving into the many layers of the situation, aiming for a comprehensive understanding of the issue at hand. Joining me today to discuss the same is the former Prime Minister of Montenegro, Professor Igor Lukšić. Professor Lukšić has held various prominent positions such as the Prime Minister of Montenegro, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Finance, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, and other prominent positions. He is a professor at the University of Dona Gorica and is a renowned commentator on the issues of international importance. Thank you so much, sir, for your time and a very warm welcome to the show.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Sir, I would like to begin the discussion by asking that could you please explain the international community's concern regarding Russia's action in Ukraine and the violations of international law that has been taken place?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think it is hard, or one can never overemphasize, the impact of such a big aggression that Russia has been conducting against Ukraine. Unfortunately, I think as time goes by and this war is getting longer and longer, maybe world's attention is less and less focused on what's going on in Ukraine, especially given that there are, multiple new events going on around the globe, and most notably very recent attack of Hamas on Israel and Israel spending or continuing response to that particular terrorist attack. So one can easily lose it, I think, with the passage of time. But I think it would be very wrong to lose sight of what's going on in Ukraine, because as you pointed it out, it has big ramifications on the international law, because it opens up a lot of questions, and if we just let it pass without investing efforts to kind of restore regard of principles of international law, then the world becomes very much a chaotic place. Obviously, the fact that the world is growing very much complex, and not even decade after decade, I think even year after year, it's getting more and more complex, and obviously less and less Eurocentric, which means that many parts of the world, many countries actually either see this conflict with different eyes, or they don't really feel that impact the way we feel it in Europe. But still, just imagine this situation and what impact it has on the implementation of UN Charter. I mean, in this case, we have a country that is a member state, permanent member state of the Security Council, also exercising veto power, and that country has attacked another country, and the world cannot do anything about it. I mean, the UN actually cannot do much about it. So I think this whole conflict shows the fragility of the world-based order, and therefore, I believe the interest for everyone in every corner of the world, so that we get together to try to somehow solve it and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, coming to the security dynamics. So how has the ongoing situation in Ukraine affected the security dynamics, especially in Europe and neighboring nations?
It has obviously going to have a lot of security consequences. One of the miscalculations of President Putin was that attacking Ukraine, it will, after a while, cause the NATO to either refrain from further action or, keep European countries apart as far as taking the stance of unanimity towards the aggression, so on and so on. And that has been obviously a miscalculation. Not only does it not happening, but actually, despite everything, so I think Western allies remain quite unanimous as far as this aggression is concerned. But it's also that NATO, in the meantime, has expanded. And very recently, I've read that Turkish President Erdogan has sent the proposal for Turkish Parliament to ratify Sweden's membership into NATO as well. Sweden will follow soon Finland. So, which means that basically NATO has expanded over the past 2 years through a kind of very, fast-track procedure as a response to the security threat coming from Russia attacking Ukraine. So obviously it already has security implications. But of course, the question is the long run, and the question is what comes next, because sooner or later the war will have to end, and what sort of implications it may have on the overall security architecture of not only our part of the world, but maybe it may have implications for all over the world. And that is also something that we need to pay very close attention to. And that is also why this conflict, when it ends in line with basic principles of the international law.
Exactly. So, can you elaborate on the economic consequences of the war coming from the security and diplomatic dynamics? So, how has the war impacted on the economics dynamics and the trade relationships of the European nations with Russia and Ukraine?
You see, many people have argued that trade, an extensive trade, can help preempt any wars or may actually prevent big wars breaking out. The fact that European Union started after the Second World War as a peace project based on interlinking major industries of coal and steel, and then spreading further out when to combine other sectors, other markets into a single market of the EU, but still making sure that it is all a produce of what started as a peace project. So many people argued that investing in trade and expanding trade should help preempting wars and conflicts. This situation may actually be a counter argument to some, although I don't belong to that group, that whatever you do, sooner or later a major conflict may arise, because it's not only about economy and it's not only about trade. So I belong to the group of people who want to be reasonable in terms that I still believe that trade holds a powerful argument, and interlinking economies holds a very powerful argument. So therefore, the idea of trading Russian oil and gas for kind of peace on the eastern part of Europe was was the bottom line, but unfortunately we were proven wrong. Which doesn't mean that we should give up, extending trade, and we should give up trying to formulate adequate trade policies. But right now, the fact of the matter is that the European Union has gone more quickly, more independent from Russian oil and gas, which for the European Union's long-term energy security is much better than the situation we used to have only a few years back. And I think along with the green transition, it actually puts European Union and the European market into a more into a stronger position. Of course, it doesn't mean, again, that in the long run, and once the conflict ends, we should not try to build back some trade relationships with Russia. Russia is a big country. Russia has always been a very important country. But I think we need, first things come first, and that means that everybody should invest in peace and security to make sure that nobody really feels threatened. And then obviously a follow-up is to try to enrich relationships with economic cooperation, cultural cooperation, and other aspects. So I think that economic consequences of the conflict are already visible. In the short run, obviously, it was the spiking oil and gas prices. But right now, I think that the impact of that is has been put more or less under control. And I think what European economy is being now faced with is the cure against inflation, which was the aftermath of the post-pandemic recovery. So despite the war in Ukraine, right now, I think the fact that some of the European economies have slowed down or are on the brink of recession has more to do with fighting against inflation for the long-term stability of overall economic setting, rather than a direct impact of that particular conflict.
Yeah. Now coming to the solution. So, what diplomatic efforts have been made by European leaders to resolve the Ukraine crisis, and what challenges have they encountered in finding a peaceful solution, and what is the way forward from here?
Well, eventually it will have to be Ukraine and Russia, despite being that hard to imagine right now. But I think eventually it will have to be a peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. European Union or other countries probably should, maybe even China or India, should actually support the process and maybe play the role of someone who can issue a particular guarantee for whatever it makes sense for those two countries when they eventually and hopefully agree on some peace terms. But in the meantime, I think what European leaders have been focused on has been to make sure that Ukraine doesn't feel alone, that the fact that Ukraine has been asked or be given candidate status for the membership into the EU, which means that there is eventually European Union membership future for Ukraine. I think that's really very important, and plus coming to aid to Ukraine to make sure that they don't really lose the war. So these have been plus offering solidarity and supporting refugees and humanitarian support and all that. I think has been a package of very unanimous support in this stage of the conflict. But obviously, there must be a brighter future for everyone, meaning that sooner or later there will have to be some peace talks and peace terms that will have to be respected. And I think European Union could play a very important role of a guarantor in that particular case. But I think opening the door for Ukraine to eventually join EU is very powerful, I think, act of support.
Yeah, you talked about granting a permanent membership to Ukraine for European Union. So, do you think so? Other leaders of European Union are on the same page?
Well, I think, as I said, I mean, Montenegro is in a relatively similar situation in terms that we are also a candidate country, but we've been conducting accession talks for already like 10 years. Yeah. So eventually. There is also European Union full membership waiting for us as well, Montenegro, Western Balkan countries too. It's also Ukraine, but it's also Moldova. So there is a number of countries in this sort of a pipeline waiting to be made part of EU. So the whole conflict and the war between Ukraine and Russia has also reopened the question of whether EU should enlarge and how quickly it should enlarge. And as I said, EU started as a peace project after the Second World War by interlinking major industries between France and Germany and four more countries, Italy and the Benelux countries. In the meantime, it has expanded to 27 member states. Unfortunately, UK decided to leave some years back, but there are more countries in the pipeline on the continent trying to get inside EU. So probably understanding the roots of the integration, it makes it only so natural to actually expect for the process to speed up after another conflict emerges. It is very unfortunate at the same time and tragic that we haven't seen it before, actually. I think European Union and European leaders probably could have been more proactive 10 years ago, or 5 or 6, 7 years ago, by laying out more proactively enlargement policy, accepting new member states, and by doing that, probably also preventing bigger conflicts to arise. So I think the sooner EU decides on how to enlarge, I personally argue for a cascade approach in terms of giving all the candidate status associate membership very soon, after implementing some necessary regulatory tasks. But after that, once you're an associate member, I believe that it should be translated into political membership by taking part in European elections, or economic integration by opening up structural development funds for the candidate countries on a bigger scale. That also means that associate members should have responsibilities such as fully following on Europeans' security and foreign policy, for example, and so on and so on. And in the meantime, EU will have worked out the way to offer full membership to all these countries, because right now one of the obstacles, as you probably know, is that some countries in the EU think that EU is not really ready for the further enlargement, because it is a very complex structure. So to grow from 27 to 35 or 36, it takes some internal reforms. So this formula, which I argue for, actually offers time by acting right now, but it also offers time to make sure that the new EU Union will be able to absorb everybody else. So that's why I think the power of the enlargement and integration is so big, and we should not waste it away.
Yeah, now coming from EU to NATO. So, how you also talked about NATO. So how has the Ukraine conflict influenced NATO and its role in ensuring the security of the European member states?
Well, actually, if anyone was skeptical about NATO before, I think the conflict in Ukraine has shown that NATO structure is one worth investing in. It is a defensive structure. Countries or member states act in solidarity. So everybody taking part in that particular security alliance should feel protected from any threat, or even if there is a threat arising, that countries should work out together the way how to confront any threat arising. So that's very important. That is a precondition for everything else. So I think, and at least that was one of major arguments that in Montenegro we used when I was in government and working towards NATO membership. One of the arguments we used was that NATO is a insurance policy. You buy an insurance policy, you pay a premium, yes, but benefits you gain are multiple, and that is quite important. So NATO, I think, remains critical structure as far as not only transatlantic ties are concerned, but also as far as security of Europe is concerned. And NATO should also be used as an asset for the future, global discussions about the overall world peace architecture. Because right now, we all see that the world is changing, and at least G20. When you look at the meetings of G20, it is as plain as possible that the world has changed. When you compare, for example, G7 on one side and BRICS on the other side, we compare economic power, you see demographics and so on. So the world has changed, and we need to take into account all those changes in attempt to work out the new global rule-based order, because we need it. I mean, our Earth, one Earth, we are faced and confronted with so many challenges. So and it requires supranational structures to be able to respond to whatever humanity needs at this stage.
Yeah, So, coming to another angle of security. So, in what ways has the refugee crisis resulting from the Ukraine war influenced European immigration policies and social dynamics in the host countries? Because we have seen after the Ukraine war, a lot of countries are even accepting immigrants, while there are countries who are hesitant enough to accept immigrants.
Indeed, you're quite right. And as time goes by and the war continues, also, it has different impact on different societies. In the first months of the war, I think everybody was quite eager to show, welcome to all those people who had to flee war-stricken areas. But at the same time, it differs. Countries like Poland saw, hundreds of thousands of people, even probably millions, arriving. The same is probably true for other neighboring countries to Ukraine. But even in Montenegro, we've seen a big inflow of people. And interestingly enough, it's not only Ukrainian people; it's also Russian people. I think this war has had also big structural impact on Russian society, because hundreds of thousands of people were quite able, talented, educated, had to leave in order to make sure that they're able to work abroad, continue being part of value chains, global value chains, and so on, in the IT industry and other industries. So it is a big structural loss for the Russian society, which I don't know if they're really aware of. Probably they are, but they don't show any sympathy to the problem they have, and there will be a growing problem in the future. So it's not only Ukrainian refugees; it's also Russian people who didn't want to take part in the war and left. So countries like Georgia, for example, in the Caucasus region, Balkan countries, our neighboring country Serbia, but also Montenegro, and the impact has been different from one country to another. I have to say that as far as Montenegro is concerned, we've seen an inflow, a lot of people, an influx of a lot of people, but those people have tremendously also supported Montenegrin economy. It may sound as a paradox, but they've moved in, settled, they moved their businesses, and Montenegrin economy has also seen benefits from that. Through this added demand, and that is probably why that is the explanation. When you look at macroeconomic statistics of Montenegro and other European countries, you'll see a gap in favor of Montenegro, and a gap from the average in favor of Montenegro, and that's pretty much the reason for it. So from one country to another, the impact has been different, but the neighboring countries to Ukraine, probably the biggest impact. But sooner or later, it is also cause for certain frictions. In case of Poland, there was a friction because of because of farmers and agricultural production, because all of a sudden some of the people felt feared that subsidized or depressed prices of Ukrainian agricultural produce could harm their own markets, their own benefits, and their own standard of living, and so on. So, war is generally, bringing grief, pain, misery to everyone. So there might be some small benefits here and there for some countries which have been running lack of labor force, or some moving in to stay on, like in case of Montenegro, on a prolonged, so to speak, tourism holiday and so on. But in the long run, wars only bring grief, pain, and misery, and the sooner it ends, the better for everyone, and that is the bottom line.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for your time once again. Really hope the situation gets better soon, and both the countries come to the terms of ceasefire. It was a pleasure hosting you. Thank you very much once again for speaking to us.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.